Welcome to the Gay Buddhist Forum, where teachers from all schools of Buddhism offer their perspectives on the Dharma and its application in modern times, especially for LGBTQI audiences. These talks are offered freely to the world and made possible by appreciative listeners. If you would like to support our efforts to share the Dharma with underserved audiences, please visit gaybuddhist.org. There you can donate, find a list of upcoming speakers, or enjoy many hundreds of these recorded talks dating back to 1996.
So at this point in our program, we go around the room and introduce ourselves, first and or last name. Is there anyone that's here today for the first time, first or second time, or returning after an absence? Welcome. Welcome. Hope you can stay afterwards and meet some of our Sangha members during the social hour. So, welcome again. My name is David Lewis. Happy to see you here this morning.
I'm Shambhala. My name is Peter.
My name is
Todd.
Great.
My name is Fred.
I'm Joe.
My name is Ray Dyer.
My name is Bill.
I'm Jack.
And Peter.
I'm Tom Bruein. My name is David.
I'm John Stewart.
Marty.
Lee.
I'm Jerry.
I'm Waldo. My name is Dal.
I am John.
I'm Jay Dickinson.
My name is Todd Kwan.
I'm Richard.
Peter.
Eric.
Paul Winternitz.
Greg.
Gary. My name is Tage.
I'm George.
My name is Dennis.
I'm Fernando.
My name is Roy.
I'm Kay Matsuda.
I'm Peter.
I'm Rod.
Gary. My name is Manuel.
My name is Greg.
My name is Andre.
Robert.
My name is Cass.
My name is Gary.
I'm Michael.
And my name is Harley.
My name is Jim.
And I'm Ed.
Welcome. Our speaker this morning is our very own Gary Ost, member of our Sangha. Gary has over 3 decades of experience as a parish priest in the Episcopal Church, from which he retired in August of 2007. He has been following the Dharma since the fall of 2008, when he was first introduced to the Gay Buddhist Fellowship. He appreciates noticing similarities between the Buddha's teaching and the preaching of St. Francis of Assisi. He is also involved in some Native American ways, having completed a vision quest in June of 2009. His topic this morning will be Death, the Third Heavenly Messenger. Welcome, Gary.
Well, the first thing I think I need to say is I feel a little nervous. A little surprised that I was asked to speak, since I've only been a member of GBF since the fall of 2008, which was when I began following the Dharma. So I'm a newbie. And the ironic thing is that although I could be young enough in the Dharma to benefit from beginner's mind, there's a possibility it's too late for me. I'm in between beginner's mind and not quite being wise enough. But I'm honored to be able to speak to you. This has become a very important part of my life, and this Sangha has become a very important support in my life. So I'll do the best I can. I hope you don't mind. I'm going to be reading my Dharma talk. And I hope that this will all help us a little. So Jerry Jones asked me to talk about death. It was because he knew that I retired from the Episcopal Church in Rossmore, which is the retirement community in Walnut Creek of about 9,000 people. And he knew that I had spent 25 years there. He probably also knew that the average age there has gone from 73 when I began to 77 when I retired. So he probably thought that would make me an expert in the subject of death. Well, maybe yes and maybe no. In dealing with death, I learned some things, but in not dealing with some of my own issues, I'm surprised to say I did not learn some things. So in accepting this assignment and thinking it over the last several months, I've made some important discoveries about myself and my own relationship to death, which I will share shortly. But first I want to share some things that I have learned that the Buddha said about death. The awareness of death actually played an important role in the Buddha's waking up. A few Sundays ago, our Dharma teacher, Pamela Weiss, reminded us that it is said that 3 experiences shook the young Prince Siddhartha awake. Seeing a sick person, seeing an aging person, and seeing a dead person. It is likewise said that Siddhartha's father yearned to cushion his son from the harsh realities of life, perhaps in part because of at the boy's birth, the seer had said that this young man was going to grow up either to be a great king or a great spiritual teacher, and his father knew what he earnestly hoped for, which was that he would be his successor, a great king. Siddhartha's father was motivated to protect him from the spiritual realities of life so much that he effectively imprisoned the young man in a garden of sensual delight, so over the top that he never even saw sickness or aging or death. In fact, the story is told that his father dispatched gardeners every night to trim all the plants, cutting off all of the old blossoms and any imperfections. Now, before you think that that's just a cute story, and none of us would ever be so clever about denial, I must ask you if you can identify with an experience I recently had. In the midst of meditating on my cushion one day, I noticed some brown buds on the bouquet that I had on my altar. I noticed that I was seriously tempted to interrupt my meditation in order to pick them off. And then I noticed something deeper. Not only do I always attempt to remove the imperfections in the objects I surround my life with, I always do so out of the motivation to look good in the eyes of others. Even deeper, to get them to see me in a better way than I see myself, and even deeper, hoping that they'll tell me I'm okay. Somewhere in the course of the last year and a half, I heard that the Buddha considered the belief that we are separate and alone in life to be the central delusion behind suffering. And I noticed that a part of me would rather hold on to the delusion that I'm all alone, separate, a special sufferer, than to accept life as it really is, with 10,000 blessings and 10,000 sorrows, the glass always half full as well as half empty, characterized not only by the fact that everything is changing and must come to an end, but also by the fact that at any moment, something beautiful and surprising may arise. Fortunately, in this little encounter with my mind, I had the grace to smile and show some compassion on myself. So this is what I do, I said to myself. And just to experience it a different way, I chose to let it go for a short while, let go this desire, obsessive compulsively, to be perfect. When I could see how much I am like everybody else, I could not only drop a bit of my delusion, but I could also feel less separate and less alone. And then I said, thinking, and continued with my meditation. So, waking up. When Siddhartha ventured beyond the safety of his false world, the scales began to fall from his eyes as first he saw a sick person, and then he saw an aging person, and then he saw a corpse being carried out of the city. So significant was Siddhartha's confrontation with those three unsightly scenes that later the Buddha would refer to them as his three messengers. That catches my attention because in my tradition those would be called the three angels. Angel being Greek for messenger. Sickness, aging, and death called Siddhartha like angels to a pursuit of enlightenment. However, the story makes an important distinction at this point. There was a fourth messenger. Siddhartha then saw an ascetic from which the seed was planted in his mind to go out and seek his own enlightenment. This is important because the motivation behind the discovery of the Dharma was not just fleeing from the suffering in life, represented by the first three messengers, but seeking relief from that suffering. The Buddha would go on always to say, I teach two things, suffering and the end of suffering. So although the awareness of death played an important role in the Buddha's waking up, and likewise it plays an important role in our own waking up, we begin to see that the Buddha did not really give death too much importance. Because for the Buddha, death was not the cause of suffering. Desiring for things to be different from the way they really are is the cause of suffering. Death is natural. Trying to ignore death, which would be delusion, or retreating in fear to any distractions from the reality of death, which would be aversion, or glamorizing death in any way, which is really attachment, including too much speculation on the afterlife, even speculation on reincarnation, both of which can be called forms of attachment to death, are the causes of suffering in the case of death. The Buddha actually made some comments about this in the context of his teaching on what he called the four imponderables. He is quoted as saying, "These four imponderables are not to be speculated about. Whoever speculates about them would go mad and experience vexation." Which four? First, the Buddha range of the Buddhas. That is, the range of powers a Buddha develops as a result of becoming a Buddha. Second, the jhana range of one absorbed in jhana. That is, the range of powers that one may obtain while absorbed in the meditative state of profound stillness and concentration. Third, the results of karma. That is, what happens after life. And fourth, speculation about the first moment, purpose, whatever, of the cosmos. Whoever speculates about those would go mad and experience vexation. Jerry's invitation to reflect on my proximity to death in my parish has allowed me to see the role of attachment, aversion, and delusion, all three, in my own relationship to death. And here's what I notice. My mind actually used the situation in my retirement community parish as the opportunity to avoid really looking at my own death. The first thing I notice is the role of delusion in my thinking. You see, I managed to arrive as the priest of this parish when I was only 35 years old. That made me the age of their grandchildren. And even though I aged by 25 years by the time I retired, many of my parishioners were by then in their late 80s or early 90s, which meant I was still young enough to be at most the age of their children. Although I won their respect, I was still always the young man. Mm-hmm. And I bought into the illusion. So although I ministered to more and more dying people and performed more and more funerals, one year there were 10. And in a congregation of 100, that is literally a decimation. Still, I could continue to think of death as something that happened to other people. I became proficient in ministering to the dying without my really having to look at my own mortality. But I was able to avoid looking closely at death by another avenue of escape, namely attachment. And this one is causing me a bit of work right now, for it comes right out of the beliefs of my church, about which I must now question and seek the honest truth for myself. For, you may have noticed, Christianity has a particular attachment to the doctrine of the resurrection. And although I have prided myself on being a member of a relatively progressive church, one that tends to be just as concerned about creating the kingdom of God on earth as it is about awaiting the kingdom of God in heaven, still there is something of the nature of life surrounded by little cotton balls in believing that what happens to this body is less important than what happens to the soul after death. Through all those funerals, I preached comforting words that minimized the pain of death to the survivors, encouraging them not to think of their own death as an eternal death, which in the end even had the effect of glamorizing death as the gateway to eternal life. This often actually encouraged attachment to a wish about life everlasting. And that attachment could, and often did, work to make people less aware of how death, as painful as it is marked by more suffering when we yearn for it to be different from the way it is. Some Christians are so concerned about getting out of here and getting to the next place that I'm afraid they aren't alert to either the joys or the responsibilities of being alive now. Now, this does not mean that faith in God is escapist or wishful thinking. By the way, I love the fact that Buddhism is basically agnostic. And I read in one of the books in our reading group in the East Bay, that means being agnostic about being agnostic. So faith can be defined as trust rather than intellectual belief, like faith or trust in the interdependence of our relations, both our human relations and possibly even trust in a higher power, a purpose or ultimate cause or mystery or some other explanation of how things came to be. I know. That's cosmogony, or the contemplation of how things came to be, and it's one of the four imponderables, but some of us just can't help ourselves. So I avoided looking at my own death by delusion and by attachment. Was I also averse? Well, I didn't think so, until I realized late in the process of thinking about this Dharma talk, like yesterday morning. That I wasn't planning on mentioning the most personal encounter with the loss of death I've had in my life, which actually occurred while I was the priest of this parish with all this death going on around me that I wasn't letting touch me. And I never let anybody in my parish see my pain around my own experience of loss. It was the death of my first partner in the early days of the AIDS epidemic. Ken lived 18 months after his first hospitalization with pneumocystis. And because he was not out of the closet as a doctor, and I was not out of the closet yet as a priest, I ministered to him all that time without telling my parishioners. I kept up a good front and helped Ken with his transition just as I would any parishioner. And I kept at bay the pain of my own loss. In fact, for the first month after he died, I even felt some relief, some pride. Mission accomplished, I thought. He's no longer in pain. And I was a great partner right to the end. But one day I came home to the emptiness and faced it for the first time. Wait. He's never coming back. He's really dead. Ultimately, as a part of my grief work, I did come out in my parish and even became known for being one of the first gay priests who came out and then stayed. Worked through the difficulties. To their credit and mine, I stayed 19 more years, retiring with a big party at the end. But do I have problems with aversion to death? Gee, I think so. But I had a dream a little over a year ago, about 4 months into my meditation practice, which I now think was another chance to welcome the third messenger. It was also, I think not coincidentally, 1 month after my last partner, Bob, and I decided to end our relationship of 11 years, which was going to mean the dissolution of both a domestic partnership and one of the 18,000 gay marriages allowed during the window of opportunity. And it was by my initiative. So I was feeling some shame, I was feeling some hurt, and then I had this dream. I was standing at the open door of a small airplane, getting ready to do my first solo skydive. I have already done the easy one, a tandem jump, where I was strapped up against the butt of the cute drop zone manager and all I had to do was to hang on. There goes my problem with yearning. But in my dream, it was my turn to jump alone. And there were people lined up behind me waiting their turn. You only have so much time because everybody needs to get out at about the same time in order to aim for the same general landing area. But at the last moment I said, wait, I don't know who packed my chute. Which is safety rule number 1 in skydiving. Know who packed your chute. If you didn't pack it yourself, know and trust the person who did. And I didn't pack it, and I didn't know who did. I have never had a near-death experience, but this dream came very close. In a flash, I saw how I truly feel about my life and my death. I realized that life is wonderful and I would prefer it. But I also realized that death is a part of life and I was either just about to experience it or to experience it later. I was ready to die if that was what was up for me, without complaint and without regret. But I was also ready to live if the chute deployed properly. The glass was half empty and half full. My life had 10,000 blessings and 10,000 sorrows. I was participating in the death of my marriage, but I was also participating in the creation of something new. I accepted the whole thing. Perhaps the most profound realization I had was that I was not afraid. So I jumped. And that's where I woke up. Before knowing how it was going to end. But I think I got the message. I think I have now entered a time of beginning to reconstruct the way I am in the world. If you look at your own lives, I think that you too will see how events and people have acted as messengers to help you wake up, including even the third messenger. But remember, for the Buddha, death was only one of the four messengers that helped him wake up. It is no more important, nor any less important, than any other messenger that would help wake us up. The point is to wake up. Being honestly curious about our own relationship to death is therefore not only the courageous course of action, but more important, it is the skillful course of action. I love how the Buddha's Dharma puts things in their proper place, don't you? Death is included in the first noble truth as one of the pains of life that we must all experience. But the second noble truth also teaches us that none of the three heavenly messengers, sickness, aging, or death, is the cause of suffering. Desiring for things to be other than the way they are is the cause of suffering. The Buddha neither fixated on death in the manner of attachment, nor feared death in the manner of aversion. And he gave up the delusion that death does not exist or hurt. He was therefore ready to perceive the invitation of the fourth heavenly messenger, the ascetic, to pursue insight meditation with the intention of fully waking up and becoming the enlightened one. We can be relieved from a good deal of the suffering in our lives if we follow the Buddha's example, and especially around the idea of death, enter into an honest investigation of how we receive the messenger of death. So, in closing, I recommend inviting yourself to ask 3 questions. First, how can I show compassion toward myself in looking at the ways in which I have been deluded in my relationship to my own death? Second, how can I show compassion toward myself in looking at the ways in which I have been attached to certain beliefs about my own death? And third, how can I show compassion toward myself in looking at the ways in which I have had aversion to thinking about my own death? If we can compassionately engage in such open-hearted investigation, then we can reduce our suffering about death by neither fixating on death in the manner of attachment, nor fearing death in the manner of aversion, nor deluding ourselves into thinking that death does not matter or hurt. It hurts, but more important, it matters, because our awareness of it helps us wake up and become fully enlightened. If I've said anything inaccurate, I suspect there's quite a bit of time left for you to correct me.
Any questions for Gary? Comments? I actually have a comment, if I may. I didn't hear anything inaccurate. But I would add, The Buddha did, as you pointed out, Gary, have a list of imponderables, which he kind of advised us to stay away from, but he also had a list of ponderables. And one was death. The Buddha very often, many times in the suttas, recommended that his monks and lay followers reflect on their death every day. He had a list of things to reflect on every day. And death was one. And it was the reflections that he offered was basically what Gary just offered us. That death is a big deal, and it's not a problem. So thank you, Gary, for being our heavenly messenger this morning.
Yeah.
So I don't have a question, but I realized I was so absorbed in your talk and the richness of it that I wasn't formulating questions. There was a lot there to absorb, and I'm very thankful that you volunteered and came before us to share. And it gives me, even though we were on the retreat together last fall, it gives me such great insight into your experience and what a great asset we have in having you.
Thank you, Tom.
Yeah, Gary, thank you very much for a very generous talk. Can you say again what the imponderables were? Because I think I do them all.
So the first imponderable was the Buddha range of the Buddhas, which means the range of powers that a Buddha develops as a result of becoming a Buddha. Sounds like an ego trip. The second was the jhana range of one absorbed in jhana. And jhana is the meditative state of profound stillness and concentration. I read in Wikipedia that Buddhism added to the Hindu definition of profound stillness and concentration the ingredient of plus liberating cognition. But for as good as it is, to be absorbed in looking at just how great your jhana range is an imponderable. The third is the results of karma, how it works, where it's going, how it arises. And the fourth is speculation about cosmogony, how things came to be, how the universe came to be. Don't go there.
I do all the time. And it doesn't cause me suffering. It's totally fascinating. I don't get that.
So I think the Buddha would say, if you do go there, notice that.
I have a colleague whose father has just died after a long and horrible illness, and her mother is about to die. And she is, as you would think, she's a complete wreck. And we've been talking on and off about this, and she has mostly been saying how absolutely miserable her life is, taking care of three lives, herself, her mother's, and her dead father's ongoing life. And then one day I asked her, and I was expecting something similar, and she said, well, yes, it's all horrible, but the other parts of the life cycle are wonderful, because my son is flying to New York to propose to his girlfriend. And I thought, this is really, it's putting things into perspective. And then my second thought was, this is something that is much more likely to happen in a straight person's life and in a gay person's life, especially younger, gay men who hadn't married because we didn't have freedom as all of that. So my question was, do you want to say something specific about reaching some sort of equanimity, especially for gay people dealing with death and in the absence of family members, not all family members, but family members going through the uplifting parts of the life cycle.
Well, it seems to me that one of the greatest sources of suffering for us as gay people is to think that we're alone. To think that we're so different from straight people that somehow we're alone. And so that is not to say that we're not different, but perhaps in our noticing and meditating, we could lean into the feelings of being different and remind ourselves that despite the fact that we are different, other people think that too. So we're not alone. This is not quite equanimity, but I learned this winter about the 4 heavenly abodes, and I realized that the 3rd heavenly abode had my name on it because I did not want it. I could not see myself participating in it at all. So the 1st heavenly abode is to practice sending loving kindness to people. The 2nd heavenly abode is to practice sending compassion to people. I'll save the 3rd one because that's the tough one for me. The 4th heavenly abode is to practice equanimity, neither being too averse nor too attached. But the 3rd one I have problems with, and that is to send sympathetic joy to other people when they are enjoying success, especially in areas where you are not enjoying success. And as I was seeing spring around the corner in my perpetual yearning for romance, and the fact that I am in between things in my life, I knew what I needed to do. And so I sort of made a vow to myself that this spring, every time I saw lovers enjoying romance, I was going to stop myself and I was going to say, I send you joy for enjoying your romance. And I don't know, maybe we need to do that when we think that we're different and alone and see other people who are not like us, and to send them sympathetic joy for not being gay. You're not suffering the way we suffer. I don't know if I addressed your question, Shantanu.
Okay. Thank you for this. My talk is very provocative. On a subject I try to avoid thinking about most of the time. I was wondering in retrospect how you felt about the fact that it took you a month after your partner died before you were able to experience the emptiness of the space, and whether that month of denial or that period of denial was a useful coping mechanism of some kind, or whether you think in retrospect that it would have been a fuller experience if you had been aware all the way through of the impending absence and the absence at the moment of his passing.
I think denial is a natural way of protecting ourselves when somebody dies. And not denial of the fact, but denial of the feelings. I'm sure everybody's heard about the stages of grief and dying. So, what would the mindful way be of going through all the stages of grief? I suspect it would not be to avoid having that month of denial, but to be fully awake to it somehow. Thank you for raising that. I'm willing to think about how that month might have gone.
My question was that have you read any of Ryan Pochi's work?
Again, say his name?
Ryan Pochi.
No, I have not.
When he died back in the 70s, one of the first books I read was that, being the Buddhist here in America, there was very few people who mourn on his passing except other Buddhists and people who continue to follow his work. We've had a lot of people lately continue to try and publish his work because they supported some of the things that he did and stuff like that, what you say makes sense. Some of it covered some of the things that they've said in some of his work and stuff like that. And, I've tried to apply some of those aspects in my personal life, being who I am, things like that. And, in a sense, not so much people that I have lost over the years as far as my personal romances, but family members and things. People that died in my arms there, died when I was there, and others that just kind of dropped off to that. There's just very few of us left now, just me, my mother, and some spread out brothers and sisters, whereas 10, 15 years ago there was a considerable more of us, so it's just like a big negative in my family and stuff like that, but some of them kind of knew it was going to happen that way and stuff, because everyone's way up there. My mother's like 65 now, so, whereas her mother was like 85, so. But it makes sense and stuff. I just wanted to ask you that question. Do you still, utilize some of your philosophies from the Christian church with the Buddhism? I'm sure they got Christian Buddhists out
there. After a year and a half of not doing so, I went back to church this spring. Unfortunately, I was a piece of meat. They wanted me to be a priest. And so I said, but wait a minute, I'm very engaged in taking a look at the Buddha's dharma. And unfortunately, the response was, "Oh, we need a priest like you here." Since then, I have recovered and am setting boundaries.
So, thank you, first of all. It was interesting, and I want to suggest it from my own recent experience, carrying it a step further. So I'm recently semi-retired and recognizing being older and closer to death. And so, as I heard it, you were talking about it's not so bad, death, that is. And I've recently been having some experience of the more positive aspect of it too, and it's sort of related to the semi-retirement. So that both of them, I've focused most of my life on the future, doing things, achieving things, creating things, developing relationships, etc. It's always been about them, and so I've always been very busy doing. And now, as the end of this process is looming larger, it's easier to focus on being in the moment, and a lot of the pursuits fall away. And that's it's quite a striking change for me. It's still pretty early. So I just wanted to share that experience.
Thank you. I identify.
Thanks so much for your share. It's been a very strange week for me around death, and it just kind of came together as you were speaking. In my professional life, I've been trying to leave my job for a long time, and I'm kind of golden handcuffed, trapped in my head to it, and I know how to leave things disastrously and force a change, but I'm trying to do it with integrity, and just been kind of a struggle. And I was driving last week in Big Sur with my friends, and for the strangest, I had the strangest impulse. I could just turn the car and go over the side. Yeah. And so I was, I'm not suicidal at all, but it was just this weird impulse. So I told my friends, I'm like, somebody else should drive right now. So they did. And I told them what was going on because they were really close friends. And I was like, it's the weirdest thing. I don't want to. I'm not suicidal, but I was just getting this vertigo, weird impulse. So, and then last night I dreamt that I was out on this like rail, or like a, I don't know what it would be, like a railing looking over at the ocean that was like hundreds of feet down, and like whoa, if I trip up, I'm gonna fall and crash to the bottom. And so it's just it's a very interesting a time to reflect on the depth that I'm kind of interplaying with right now, is that moving forward and yet having to close a chapter, and struggling with doing that with integrity and without being fear-based, and having courage. And Buddhism is great for me in that respect, because I was raised Catholic, and it didn't really sit very well with me. We were the alcoholic family, and there wasn't this loving compassion and forgiveness in the community where we were. It was kind of ridicule and scorn. So I feel so grateful to be here in the Sangha. And today, I did think it was weird. I was like, death on Mother's Day, okay. So it's so interesting how synchronistic it all becomes. And I didn't even remember my dream until like the middle of your talk, and how it all played together. So thanks so much for giving us this.
You're welcome. Did you hear yourself say, I was so afraid I would trip up? I'm not a Jungian analyst, but interesting words connected with your dream.
Hi, my name's Greg. Good to see you again. I have a few thoughts that came up for me through your talk. Thank you. The first one is on my earliest journal, the journal from my teenage years, when I opened the front flap, there's a quote from the Christian Bible. I imagine it's Paul. It says, to live is Christ, but to die is gain. And I thought, how amazing that a 17-year-old would write that in his journal. A tortured 17-year-old gave him. The second thought I had was that, probably like a lot of people in our community, I lived for about 4 years with white suited men with lots of education telling me that I was going to die, that I would not live past age 40. And I did. And it was a time of great sorrow, but it was also a time of incredible presence to myself and to life and to the people around me. And I remember after the proteases were discovered and I started to realize that I was probably going to live for a while, that certain less present habits were starting to slip back into my life. I remember when I started reusing a phrase that I had abolished from my vocabulary, which was "I should have." The past conditional didn't make any sense to me when I was dying. And just about 2 months ago, I found myself wishing that I were living. The word I use is ontologically. I think Heidegger talks about living as if we're going to die. And 2 weeks ago, my partner was diagnosed with leukemia. So I've been living in this. I've been basically living in the hospital. And what I'm discovering is that it almost feels more painful to lose my beloved than to lose myself. And I think that's all, perhaps part of my wound as a shamed gay boy. That somehow my value is less than that of others. But attachment is huge. Yeah.
Well, I just wanted to thank you too for your talk, and I want to say that in the last 10 years or so, I've really noticed more and more how death is not something that happens to us at the end of a lifetime, but rather something that's always like with me. And I can very much relate to your Big Sur experience over there, you know, in terms of the idea. I've had this kind of thing come to me even when I was a child, that when you stand at a train station and there's this train rolling in, the idea of just jumping down in front of the train. And it's not because of feeling suicidal or desperate, it's just like it would be so easy to do. It would really be easy to just drive your car down the cliff or jump down. And when I think of that, I find it amazing how much we all keep it together. I really do. It's amazing because it's if you think about it, it's really easy to do. All you need to do is make the wrong turn, and people, in general, people don't. Just a thought.
Thank you, Gary. I really appreciated your talk a lot. What I just want to acknowledge about death is, in my experience, it also can serve to bring people together. I've had that experience in, the AIDS epidemic, people's illness and people's dying, that, we tend to think of ourselves as being alone and isolated and, I'm going to die alone and all that, but we never really know who's going to be there at the end. And people show up, people come out, but, we have to interact with people on the way. But it's a wonderful experience to see people coming together around the passing of someone. It actually has built friendships in my life, sharing in a person's passing. So another side of death.
Even there, 10,000 blessings, 10,000 sorrows.
Can I say one more thing? In the last, I'd say 5 years, so long after the internet, came and was a presence in our lives, I've had friends, acquaintances, contacting me from right and left. People, I knew in high school and had never thought of, and all kinds of people. And I'm glad to hear from most of them. And we've been, and others are fine. And some friends of mine and I have talked about this, and we've all wondered why, what's going on here. It's not that the internet is now more available than it had been, say, 7-8 years ago, and we all keep coming up against the same thing, that as you get older, as the awareness of death gets closer, there's a greater urgency to contact people who you could easily go the rest of your life not contacting. So I'm kind of saying what you're saying.
Thank you.
Gary, thank you, and I hope you'll be hanging around for the social hour. People have other questions and comments.
Sure.
I just want to say one thing which has come up like 4 times, this idea of falling in front of a train or falling off a cliff or driving your car off a cliff. I had a similar experience when I was on a Point Reyes lighthouse, and I just wanted to jump. And I brought it up with my meditation teacher. That's really weird. It's happening many times. I brought it up with my meditation teacher, and I said, "Has that ever happened to you? You're standing on the edge of a cliff and you just want to jump?" And he said, "Oh yeah, every time." I said, "What's it all about?" And he said, "Freedom." It's another perspective. So thank you, Gary, for that wonderful talk. Now we do announcements. We we have any announcements this morning?
Yes, I'm your host today, and so there's something out there to eat. There's also tea and hot water, and we request that you wash your cup with warm soapy water, put it back on the shelf. There is a sign-in sheet on the credenza in case people want to get signed up on the email list. I will be passing around a dana bowl. We suggested giving is $5 to $8 if you all feel so inclined to do so. And many people meet around 12:30 or so near the door and go out for lunch. And I think that's about it.
John? Next week our speaker is Heather Sunberg. She was here, I believe, 2 weeks ago. She's she's booked for a three-time visit, and she's exploring issues of dealing with judgment. She's a graduate of the Spirit Rock drama teacher program and has worked extensively in the meditation community. So that's next week. Also, Joe Good did the choreography for a really sweet, tender-hearted musical of the Berkeley Rep called Girlfriend, about two Midwestern teenage boys in the early 90s finding each other. It's very good. Those are your next Saturday.
Maybe this goes without saying, but several blocks from here is a nonprofit that allows you to sit with dying people as part of your spiritual practice. I'm involved with the Zen Hospice Project on Page Street with good folks.
Any other announcements?
Does anyone know, is next week Beta Breakers?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so it makes getting here hard. If you're coming from the north part of town, you need to cross over at Park Presidio through the park if you're coming from the north part. Otherwise, it's just a
Thank you for remembering.
Marty, remember.
On the north side of town.
It's a terrible way to prepare to meditate.
Let's gather in a circle and do our closing.
By the merits of this practice, may we and all beings be peaceful. May we and all beings be happy. May we and all beings be safe and whole. May we and all beings awaken to the light of our true nature. And may we and all beings be free.
Thank you for listening to the Gay Buddhist Forum. If you would like to hear several new talks per month and be notified of upcoming speakers so you can participate live, please subscribe to this podcast, like us on Facebook, and join our mailing list by visiting gaybuddhist.org.